China's doing in the Philippines. And that's another interesting thing that happened. Biden made a statement about how the U.S. will defend the Philippines. And then, again, another group of Filipino ships were attacked by like a huge swarm of Chinese Coast Guards, water cannons. And like that's what the CCP is doing. Like, oh, this is what Biden said. Is he really standing up for you? Maybe you should give up and join us.
Are we going to talk about the Philippines thing? The water cannon?
Yeah, I guess we can. Yeah. So this is another example of how like the Philippines is doing a great job of showing what the Chinese Communist Party is doing. Instead of keeping these things kind of under wraps.
Yeah, so what I find funny about this whole thing, this past week, there was like another Filipino, was it a Coast Guard ship?
There are two Coast Guard ships
who were basically attacked by they were trying to get to the Scarborough Shoal, and there have been Chinese maritime militia, Coast Guard camped out there for a while trying to keep people away, fishermen, away from the Scarborough Shoal and Filipino ships.
And for clarity, The Hague has ruled that the Scarborough Shoal is part of the Philippines' territory and not China's.
And that's another case where China just ignores the international laws and order that, we worked so hard to get them involved in.
But like what I found funny about this is that it turns out that the BBC, like there was a BBC reporter on one of the Filipino Coast Guard ships that got attacked by this water cannon. So.
Wait, was that this time or the last time?
This time.
Hasn't there been another time since then?
No, but before that, there was also examples of foreign media stationed on the...
No, I mean, like, I'm looking at this BBC article.
Oh, okay.
That's dated May 1st.
Right. There was another incident on a different shoal. This is near the...
Marshall?
Second Thomas Shoal. And in that case, there was also... I don't know if it was BBC, but there was definitely foreign correspondence on the Filipino Coast Guard ships. Because, again, the Philippines, as you point out, is being smart by making sure that there's coverage of these sort of things that are happening.
Yeah, so now the BBC has published this article that's like close enough to see their faces chased down by China in the South China Sea. So it's like a very evocatively written, like,
Oh no, BBC reporting angers China.
You know what would have really angered China? If their headline called it the West Philippine Sea.
Yeah. Except that might just be confusing for people, unfortunately.
It would, but I was kind of resistant to that change for that reason.
Mm-hmm.
But when you see all that the Chinese Coast Guard and maritime militia are doing in that area, that is, Filipino territory.
Yeah.
That like you can't keep calling it the South China Sea because it kind of feeds into this whole thing. And
that is a good point. Maybe we should think about how we talk about that.
Yeah. But at least for now, because we have an opportunity to clarify.
Yeah.
The Scarborough Shoal is essentially the West Philippine Sea. It has been Filipino territory for a very long time.
And I mean, it was also the case where like the Philippines weren't doing what the Chinese Coast Guard is doing now, which is trying to like keep everyone else away from it.
Right.
Right. Like you had
fishermen from other countries could go there and fish.
Because it was a natural harbor, say spot in stormy waters.
Well, and also like because of what happens with the shoals and reefs, it's like it's a natural place for fish to spawn and build up. So it's like a great fishing spot. Right.
We learned that from the Filipino fishermen. We were on their boat going there.
Yeah. And I remember looking over the bow and seeing like all these giant Chinese ships like surrounding the shoal and being, probably not as terrified as I ought to have been.
Yeah, in hindsight, that was one of the more dangerous, stupid things we've done. Let's go out into the open ocean where the CCP is being super aggressive.
I think it's one of the best things we've done.
I mean, yes, those are not necessarily exclusive.
But I was reading this BBC article and I was just like, it was really dumb of the CCP in a way, because now you have this article from the BBC that's saying things like this ship was accosted by a Chinese vessel. It's talking about how the Chinese ships were like trying to stop them, and then like the ship cut across them, and then they were like, they began firing their powerful water cannon. Like, we could hear the jets of water thundering against the metal walls. They smashed the awning in the stern and mangled a railing on one side.
That's the British using the English language.
And so it's just like talking about how bad the damage was on the other ship, and just like, it's very evocative of the CCP or like the Coast Guard being very aggressive.
And for
right?
clarity, it was 2 Filipino maritime patrol boats, and they ran into 4 Chinese Coast Guard vessels and 6 Chinese maritime militia ships.
Yeah, so they were being surrounded and hemmed in by these other ships. It's different when you have this like war of words, when you have like the CCP claiming one thing and you have the Filipino Coast Guard claiming another thing, and now you have like the BBC who's like in the middle, and they're like, it's like a on the ground, like
it's not just words. There's like real consequences.
And there's drone footage
and
helicopter footage, which is
essentially great. Like contesting the CCP's version of things, and it's just like also apparently they've put back up a barrier that the Philippines cut down, right?
Like at the Scarborough Shoal.
So it's funny that they can't back down, but there's no way for them to really spin this without like the complicity of the Filipino government. I think what happened with the previous administration is like that, because they were trying to be more friendly with China and the CCP, like they would also downplay it. So like you kind of need both sides to downplay it for the CCP to get away with the bullying tactics. So now that the Philippines is like standing up and being like, okay, well, we're going to film it. We're going to cut the barricades. We're going to bring foreign journalists on our ships so they can see what's happening. It's much harder for the CCP to be like, oh, well, we were just defending our territory. They were the aggressors,
right. And this is a really good example also of how to deal with powerful, aggressive regimes, which is that like China's strength is military. They've got like a lot more ships. They've got a lot of weapons, and I consider water cannons to be a weapon.
That would be a good place to mention too what that report Shelley saw. Speaking of the size of their military,
right? But my point, which I want to make first, is that the Philippines doesn't have the military firepower to fight back against China, and even if they started to fight back with water cannons or something more aggressive, like they could risk actually starting a war. But instead, the Philippines understands that they have a more powerful weapon on their side that the Communist Party cannot compete against, and that weapon is truth. So the Philippines has this strategy of like, we're just going to show the truth of what's happening, and they do that with video footage, right? And they've been doing a great job of this consistently for, almost a year now, I think. And that's a weapon that the CCP can't really defend against, right? The more you allow foreign correspondence, the more you allow footage, the more you make public every little thing that the CCP is doing to this much smaller, less powerful, less militarized country. That's actually a point the Philippines wins. So smart.